friends with Dorothy, fighting for your civil rights. Out on the cruel streets tonight. For Sylvia and Marcia, life was harder than you'll ever know. Still they placed a star where others just threw a stone. Ignited, 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 yeah.
We're joined today by our fabulous friends coming to us all the way from Sligo. I'll just go through the three individuals. We've got Max on the left, Seán in the centre, and on our right is Samantha as well. So welcome to you all, and happy Pride.
Happy Pride. Happy
Pride.
Yep, you've got a big week coming up. How important is Pride to a place like Sligo? You're not the biggest town. I think it's 25,000 is the population. So how important is it to the local community and the local LGBT plus community? Start off with yourself, Max.
I suppose it's just really important that people know that it's okay, and I suppose that there are other gays in the village and that they're not the only one or feel isolated. Because I know me personally, growing up in rural Leitrim, you always kind of felt like you were the only one. So, and even in Sligo as well, I suppose it wouldn't be hugely talked about. So I suppose the importance of Pride is to kind of let people know that we are here and that it's okay to be kind of out and proud.
Mm-hmm. Seán, you're not a native from Sligo yourself. Where did you originally hail from?
I am from North Donegal.
Uh-huh.
A place without a Pride at the moment, but growing up in Donegal, there's not a lot of other LGBT people like about that I would have known of. I didn't even really know I was a member of the community until my mid-20s. So you know, that environment and then getting out of that environment and coming out, you notice how many people are up there, keeping it fairly hidden. But, yeah.
Discreet is the way we
discreet. Yes.
yeah. And Samantha, what's your story? Are you from rural Ireland as well?
Yeah. So I was born in Cork, but while growing up, I moved between Cork and Cavan quite a bit. So I was in different schools, and I suppose, like, just to kind of go on with what they were saying, I don't remember anyone who was out in any of the classes that I ever had. There's no one that was actually out. Now, I've kept in contact with some of them, and I know some of them are queer people now, but none of us said anything or would have said anything just because of the culture that was there, because of the environment you're in, because of how much stigma you'd face.
It's interesting listening to the three people there, because what you're really discussing that I can see is geography, whereas in my time it was much more universal in the sense that was there anybody else in Ireland? I would echo what Samantha has said. I did not know anybody else, not only in my class, but in my school. Whereas now we know if you go to this area or that area, there's lots of LGBT people. But as you say, growing up, you start to wonder, is it just me? And then, on that basis, Max, I mean, Leitrim wouldn't have a huge population anyway. Where did you go before you felt you were comfortable about coming out?
In what way? Could you maybe?
Well, in the sense, did you come out in Leitrim, or where? Did people, as you were growing up there, were people around you, particularly say friends and family, were they aware of your choices, as I would put it?
So I came out kind of, I suppose, young enough at around 13, 14, because I knew that I liked girls and guys, and I was like, okay, I think I'm bisexual. So I came out from a young enough age, and I suppose at the time I was you know, just being a typical rebellious young teenager, and I liked dyeing my hair funky colors and wearing loads of black and different things. So I was lucky enough that in rural Leitrim, that I was able to find even just one or two LGBT people in my secondary school, like in my year and stuff. So I was fortunate enough that I was able to kind of come out then, I suppose, in relation to my sexuality while I was still living in Leitrim, but it wasn't until I moved to Galway for a year to repeat my leaving cert that I was starting to question, I suppose, my gender identity. And that felt like a much bigger thing to try and deal with. So while I was living in Galway in this kind of new environment, I found it easier to ask people to call me Max and to refer to me with he, him pronouns. And then when I went back to Leitrim and I heard I was being referred to as a girl, I was like, no, I definitely feel uncomfortable with that. So I suppose in terms of my gender identity and coming out as trans, I started coming out while I was in Galway, and then I went on to Sligo. So I've had a much easier time trying to just be myself, I suppose, in the slightly bigger towns, whereas Leitrim, it's been a bit funky, I suppose.
It's funny you should say that, because isn't it often how much hair plays a part in it? Because if you dye your hair pink or blue or whatever, you're likely to at least attract a certain type of attention. Mine was bright red when I was that age, and it was even longer than Samantha. So you can imagine it tends to act as a magnet. Coming back to yourself, Seán, I mean, my experience, are you from the Inishowen Peninsula or that part of the world?
I am. Yeah, I'm from the Inishowen Peninsula, yeah. Yeah,
my experience of people from that part of the world, and Donegal in general, or Tyrconnell, if you really want to go the whole hog, is that they're very open people, despite it being one of the most isolated parts of Ireland, that they're quite an open people, and they're a very tolerant, and I would dare go so far as to say a liberal people, in the sense that, did you ever feel uncomfortable, or what was your experience, or was it purely personal?
Well, I have family members who have been out for years, but it wasn't a case of. I didn't come out in Donegal. I was in Sligo many years before I came to the conclusion that I was bisexual. Sorry, could you repeat the question?
No, I was just saying, well, to a certain degree, you've answered it. I mean, I always would have thought that if you had come out in Donegal, it would perhaps be accepting. But let's toss it the other way around. Since you have come out a certain way, or at least if you haven't, you have now. How do you think people responded once you did?
Well, thankfully, my family was very supportive. I haven't had much pushback. I haven't really been home much since coming out. What with COVID and everything. But like I've never seen any pushback. I've like to myself. I've seen it happen to other people when I was in my teens, but from chatting to most people, it seems just to be sadly the way amongst teenagers. Yeah, I think there is a sense of amongst some of the communities, there's a openness and an acceptance. When you're so remote and so isolated from the rest of the country, it really, you have to find community wherever's there.
And family even.
Yeah.
Samantha, I'm going to put the same question to you in a certain sort of roundabout way. I think it's important for people to come out, or in my case, I mean, it was illegal, a whole range of things. So I just went off and did what I did, most of which was illegal in one form or another. So I never bothered making a song and dance about it. This is just who I am. And most people then, for many, many years, would have referred to me as the queer fella. Nowadays, we've reappropriated the word so the queer fella can come centre stage. How important do you think it is? Is it perhaps more important to be honest with yourself than it is to be open with friends and family?
I mean, you always start with being honest with yourself, but if you're being honest with yourself, that will eventually turn into being honest with your friends and family.
Mm-hmm. How did that? What was your family's or your friends and family's experience? Were there, we always knew, or I'm shocked about that?
So it's a bit of a situation. I hadn't actually talked to my mother in years before I came out anyway.
Joined the club.
Yeah. So I didn't really have much. Like, I had part of my family to come out to, and they all mostly took it fairly well.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, they were all pretty supportive.
Yeah. Did you ever have any negative experiences, or just even surprising experiences in that sense of the word? But in terms of people's reactions, yeah.
So, okay, one of my siblings, it was a few months after I'd come out. She asked me to wear a suit to her wedding.
Yeah. I bet you'd look fabulous in a suit.
Thank you. Yeah. But yeah, no, it's just, yeah.
Now, the reason why I asked that question is probably about 12 years ago, which meant I would have been in my at least mid 50s. A guy in work asked me, and he said, "Have you ever done that?" And I said, "Of course I did. I mean, everybody in my day did, or at least the people I knew." And his immediate reaction was to rush in and tell the office and say, in front of the entire office, "Did you know about him?" And I thought, for Christ's sake, in this day and age. But anyway, such are the ways of the world. Anyway, for those of us who aren't familiar, Sligo's a small town in the sense that, it's got 25,000 people. I'm guessing there are probably not an enormous amount of places to go, but how is it, particularly from a social perspective? Max?
Well, I suppose I've definitely been in Sligo a lot less time than these two. They've been living in Sligo for a bit longer than I have. I've been here the last 3-4 years. Mm-hmm. And I suppose I was in the IT as a student there for 3 years. So I wasn't much of a social going out kind of thing. There is the Swagman, which has always been very supportive of Sligo Pride, and I suppose just the prides that we've had in Sligo over the past couple of years. So that's always kind of felt like a safe environment. I was working in the Blind Tiger there up until recently, and a lot of my co-workers there were part of the LGBT community, so that just I felt very comfortable kind of being open. And then I suppose we have the queer-owned cafe here in Sligo town called Penny, which is in the 8th building, and they only opened in the last year, and they've been open and shut just with COVID restrictions and everything. Sure. So we've finally been able to organise LGBT meetups with Out West. So I suppose that's kind of where we have at the moment in terms of, I suppose, LGBT meetups kind of running throughout the year that aren't just part of Pride.
There's also Pink Friday, which happens every so often, which is just a night in a pub in town. Yeah. The Swagman.
Mm-hmm. I grew up in Dublin when it was quite a provincial centre instead of the cosmopolitan place it is now. And I was, what they say about Dublin is that you're never more than 2 steps away from an ex. I suspect it's possibly even less that way in a place like Sligo. I mean, what's people's experience there, and do you just deal with that? You're probably a lot more polite than we are in that sense. But, Seán?
Personally, no. I don't have many exes. But no, I mean, like, for some people, yeah. I mean, there's that small enough community where, everyone knows everyone, and especially in the queer community, from even what I've seen before I was out, lots of people were,
everyone knew someone else.
Everyone
in the community.
Yeah, pretty much. Everyone was connected. But I don't know if it's quite the same as
I think it depends who you are.
Yeah.
You can make anywhere that small.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh.
Now, up home was that small. I didn't expect down here to be so.
Yeah. Can I just come back to yourself, Seán, because this is what we've been discussing this on social media and on in the programs over the last couple of weeks, is that there's never been Dublin Pride, which is quite a big event, has never had somebody specifically nominated who was bi. When I tried to do a program about a year and a half ago, I had 3 people lined up who were, it was a program just to highlight being bi. 2 dropped out because, generally citing work reasons. Oh, I don't want people to know. How do you find that as how do people respond? Are they comfortable with that, or do they think, oh, he's greedy, or he's just a slutty boy, or whatever it is?
I've gotten a bit of it, to be fair, and I've gotten it online on dating apps. The moment somebody asks, like if it comes up in conversation, it's usually oh no, not dealing with that, or yeah. Thankfully now I haven't got a lot of it in person. Maybe the odd joke for my family after I came out, but that's just my family. But no, thankfully I haven't had to deal with that much. Again, I haven't been. COVID has been most of the time I've been out, so it's been
been a different experience.
Yeah.
Well, I can assure you, I grew up in an era when everybody was bi, even Elton John. Nobody was gay, everybody was bi. So it just goes to show you, doesn't it? I just want to toss this question out because it's something I've been doing with people over the last few weeks. And it's something I'm going to do a series of programs on, and that is LGBT icons. We start with yourself, Max. Was there anybody that when you were growing up and you think, oh yeah, there's somebody who I can identify with, or I admire, or I can reference?
Well, I suppose when I was about kind of 16, 17, that's when Orange is the New Black was coming out. And I think there was the season with Ruby Rose, who is, I think, non-binary, but they had very short hair at the time, and I had long hair, and I was like, oh, I want to get my hair cut like them, and that was kind of my reference thing. And then people were just like, are you a lesbian? And I was just like, well, I mean, like, I like guys and gals, but like, yeah. So I suppose there was like 1 or 2 maybe that I would have looked at, and then I suppose Lady Gaga I would have been a fan of as well, and she was. A lot of people just think, oh, she's a big ally, but like she's actually bisexual herself. So it was kind of great to have some of that representation when I was in my teens.
Yeah, I'm going to put the next one to you, Samantha. I mean, again, the same thing. I mean, Max talks about Ruby, but Ruby is Australian, and they're all something or other over there because I know I've lived there for that long. But anyway, what about yourself? I mean, was there any influences that you had, either cinema, music, literature, anywhere along the way?
I mean, there are a lot of influences. It's just I'm trying to think, were there any queer influences? It kind of hard. I grew up in a fairly religious house that anyone even like queer coded would have been kind of like, oh, you shouldn't really be going near that. So it was kind of like blocked off.
But you grew up in Cork, and Cork produced one of the great drag queens of the 20th century in Danny LaRue. But it's funny, isn't it, the way certain things get brushed under the carpet. What about literature, or even in cinema? Was there anything you ever saw and you think, oh, that's something that doesn't cross our horizons all that often?
That movie about the 2 best friends living together. When you reference, your mum was like, oh, they're
fried green tomatoes.
Fried green tomatoes.
Oh yes.
That one. Yeah, no, I remember that one.
It's funny. I spoke to a woman. She's a professor in a university. I won't talk about it. And she only discovered she's gay, and she only discovered what it is that lesbians exist when her father was watching Wimbledon, and Martina Navratilova, best tennis player of all time. And he turns around and says, "Of course, you know she's gay, or she's a lesbian." And then she says to me, "I had a word for what I was." Now, the fact that this woman went on to become a nun, I'll leave up to your own judgment. But that's what about yourself then, Sean? I mean, you grew up in a place that's rugged mountain men and GAA footballers.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I had the existence of I knew queer people existed. As I said, I have a family member who has been out for many years, and all that. I didn't have much in the way of male bisexual representation for a very long time. In fact, I think I more or less dismissed the possibility that men could be bisexual for a very long time. But God,
You're not a fan of David Bowie?
oh well, no, there's Bowie, but Freddie Mercury.
The Pet Shop Boys.
Freddie Mercury would have been a big influence on me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very big influence. I grew up loving Queen, and then when I found out Freddie Mercury was bisexual, that was just that was I think part of the awakening.
Yeah.
Slow process. But.
Before we talk about Sligo Pride, I just want to go over to Max, because I know I'm not going to say it on air, but Max, you use the Gaelic surname. You're also a Gaelgure. What's it like being LGBT and a Gaelgure? I mean, I've had friends who are LGBT and would communicate with each other as Squelga, but I used to say, isn't the language a bit limited for cultural reasons? What's your experience in that regard? Is the language limited, or is it expanding?
Oh, the language is definitely expanding and growing. And in the last 5 years alone, like, the use of Irish has just gone through the roof, especially like in a lot of social media circles. Like, Twitter would be a big one, but I'm not a big user of Twitter. But I follow an awful lot of Instagram accounts of influencers who all use Irish. And so I suppose my experience with being LGBT and a Gaeilgeoir has been just pleasantly surprising, because my understanding, even growing up, was that Irish speakers were, I suppose, a bit backwards because they were speaking this old, outdated language and whatever. But they've actually been the most supportive people when I came out. So, and there is actually quite a huge LGBT community that speak Irish. So I was involved with a documentary that went on TG Cahir. So that was, I suppose, that was a thing that happened that was LGBT centered, but like for TG Cahir. And there's Block as well for, I suppose, kind of the people a bit more kind of our age that would kind of use a lot of social media and different things. And so there is the Kirkle Queerall, which was mostly based in Dublin, but then with kind of lockdown and everything, they moved online to Zoom. So I've been able to actually join in some of those meetings. And it's just the same as like a conversation circle with Irish, but it's just for members of the LGBT community. And the language has definitely grown to have more terms, because I suppose when I first started attending the Gaeltacht courses in Connemara, the only thing that you would have heard of was homogeneisic, which was just homosexual. But there's so many other words now to kind of cover it. You have Éireach for gay man, you've Leisbach for lesbian, Trasishkinach for transgender, there is Deganesic for bisexual, there's Achak for queer. Like there's all these different words that are now available. And actually in 2017 or 2018, the USI worked on the folklore Achak, which was just like a mini Irish dictionary of all the LGBT terms, because I think NUIG Students' Union was trying to, they were ratifying some of their, was it a constitution or something, to include a like gender neutral language, so that it wasn't just he/she, it was just they. And then they found out that they weren't quite sure what to do with Irish, if using Siad Eid would be acceptable, if it could be used as like a singular they, like in English. And then they found out that they weren't entirely sure with all the, I suppose, LGBT language as Gaeilge. So they worked on developing the Folklore Atchuk, which was then launched in 2018. And I was actually invited to the launch of that. And I was only in my first year of college. And it was great. And I suppose I felt quite emotional as well that being able to speak Irish had become quite a big part of my identity in my late teens, that I was learning that not only was there this huge acceptance for LGBT people within the Irish-speaking community, but that there was all this language to be able to describe your experience. And when I found out about it, I was overwhelmed and I started crying. So.
Yeah. Well, I think we probably have to give some credit to Laura Harmon, who used to be president of USI and who grew up in a Gaeltacht in Coonday, Corky, and she's very supportive of LGBT Oswego. Let's move on to Sligo Pride. It's happening over the next week or so. Tell us, we'll leave it to any of you to start. What are the standout events that are happening? Start from the beginning of the festival and let people know what's happening. Who wants to take that up?
You have the event guide on?
Yeah, nope, I do not. Anyway, so I think I know it off by heart at this stage.
Okay.
We've been printing them out to hand up around town. And so I think I've learned it off at this stage. So on Monday the 2nd, we're starting off with 3 online events. So we have a consent workshop, an Ask Me Anything with James Byrne, who's a psychotherapist who does a lot of work with LGBT people. And then we have a Trans Northwest drop-in, so just for any members of the transgender community that are based in the general northwest of Ireland, it's just kind of an hour or two for them to drop in, say hi, and maybe make connections. And then on Tuesday the 3rd, we have a Pride and Disability panel with Full Spectrum, which is an LGBT peer support group for people with disabilities. And then with also members of Neuro Pride, which has only started up in the last few weeks. So they're running events the same week as us, focusing on being neurodivergent and I suppose being out and proud about it. And then after that, we have beach yoga, which is out in Strand Hill. So it's only about maybe 5-10 minutes outside of Sligo town. And just be doing some yoga and relaxation kind of on the beach. And then on the Wednesday, we have a nature walk through Durley Park. It's going to be guided with Michael Bell, he knows a lot about kind of the different flora and fauna that would be kind of in the vicinity, and just kind of like an educational walk, really. And then in the evening, we have the Wednesday. There is a Pride 101. We have a Pride 101 workshop with shout out. So it's just kind of going through the ABCs, I suppose, of LGBT and all that kind of stuff. So it's really aimed at maybe allies or people who are questioning and new to the community. And then we have a panel with Transgender Equality Network Ireland, who are going to give an overview of the different supports that they have available. Lilith is going to talk about the outreach that she does and working with the other trans support groups around the country. And then we're going to have members of Gossip Galway, which is the trans peer support group down in Galway, and they're just going to talk about the work that they do. On Thursday then we have games night, so I suppose I'll let Seán talk a little bit about that.
So we're running a tabletop games night for 3 hours. I'm running an RP role-playing game called Be Gay, Do Crimes. So it's, you play as a member of the LGBT community, and you try and pull off a heist of some kind. And as well as that, we are also running some virtual games such as Jackbox and the like, just to give people a fun night, just to
Options of different things to get involved in. And then the Wednesday night, we're on Thursday now. Thursday, we're going to have a talk with Missy Fortune, who is a performer and also a sex worker, and she's going to talk about kind of bodily autonomy and just what it's like to be a member of the queer community and also a sex worker, which, as we all know, have been very important to our history with the Stonewall riots and everything. And then on the Friday, we have the Penny drop-in. So in Penny Cafe, our queer-owned cafe with our flag and everything, it's just going to be all day from 12 to 7, just kind of drop in, get a coffee, get one of their iced drinks, and we're going to have chalk so people can draw on the ground if they want to colour in flags and just, I suppose, meet different people. I'm also hoping to put up a flag and people can sign their names on it if they want, and then we can have a flag of all these people who are maybe out and proud and wanted to put their name on a flag, or even just to write a little message. And then we have the Pink Friday evening in the Swagman, which has been our very supportive, I suppose, pub in town, which has always been great support to Sligo Pride. And then on the Saturday, we were hoping to get to do a parade, but we've made the difficult decision to cancel it because we don't feel that we can control a crowd just with COVID cases going up at the moment, and we want to try and keep everyone as safe as possible, because the whole point of having a Pride festival is to have a safe space. So we want to try and keep people as safe as possible. Yeah. So we are going to do a picnic in Dorley Park, which is near the playground and across from Mr. Price and Argos. So we'll have cones that we'll be able to kind of section off and just try and make sure that people can be socially distanced and in their pods. We have a PA system that we're renting with a mic and everything, so that our Grand Marshals that we had invited to take part in our parade will still be able to give a little speech, and we should have some people singing in different things. And then on the Sunday, we have brunch as kind of a wind down. I suppose anyone who might have gone out the previous night kind of to cure their hangovers with some food and maybe some water, and making sure that they're okay, and I suppose kind of checking in after the whole Pride event. And then we're finishing off our jam-packed week with a performance in the Hawkswell Theatre by one of our committee members, who is putting on a one-woman show, which is still a work in progress, that touches on the life of Eva Gorbooth, who is the sister of Constance Markovich. And she was a queer woman living in Sligo over 100 years ago, and we really kind of want to bring more awareness about kind of, I suppose, her life, and especially as a historical queer figure, because I'm sure everyone knows that Sligo is very well known for Yeats, but there have been some other phenomenal people that actually lived in Sligo and grew up in Sligo, and that they deserve a bit more recognition as well. So that is a brief overview of our week of events planned for Sligo Pride.
Yep. And of course, we should emphasise, it's not just for people who live in the town, it's people who live in Sligo County, it's people who live in the surrounding counties, Mayo, Roscommon, and even your own Leitrim as well. So
Donegal as well.
Donegal, I was just getting to that. It's just a shame that you won't have a parade this year, because we would love to come down and participate and celebrate with you. But hold on, 2022 is not that far away, so we'll keep our fingers crossed. Have a fabulous week. Stay strong, stay safe, and of course, stay fabulous. So, Max, Seán, and Samantha, delighted to have you as our guest this week, and catch you in 2022 for Sligo Pride. Yeah.
Exactly. Thank you very much.
Friends with Dorothy come out off the sidewalk and onto the street, to the sound of those legendary feet. When there's no place like home, anti-am, anti-establishment. The chaff and the short straw, they'll have a stuff for sure. but not our souls. When there's no place like home, when there's no place like home, when there's no place like